It's Friday, the 30th of September 2022. Welcome to the Fast Five by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, 5 stories, 5 minutes. Let's do it. Story number 1, AGL Australia will close the country's biggest carbon-emitting power plant 10 years earlier than planned, bowing really to shareholder pressure.
Yes, particularly the pressure from AGL's largest shareholder, billionaire Mike Cannon-Brookes. The company will close its coal-fired Loy Yang A power station in Victoria by 2035, 10 years earlier than previously planned. Now, Loy Yang currently provides about 30% of Victoria's electricity. Basically, they're going to shift to renewables. How are they going to do that? Well, they're spending $20 million to develop zero-emission energy by the middle of next decade. The company will target several renewable energy sources, including pumped hydro and hydrogen-fired peaking generators, as well as wind projects. What's really interesting is the last few days what's happened in this sector. Basically, AGL is accelerating plans to close down Loy Yang. We had Queensland government coming out saying it wants to stop coal-fired generation in that state by 2035 and will spend $60 billion to get into renewables. We've also had the federal government launch a national electricity vehicle strategy. Prior to this week, we had the New South Wales government saying it will spend $32 billion over 8 years for energy infrastructure. Victoria wants to spend $19 billion over 10 years for wind farms. There's so much going on in renewables.
Yeah, that sure is. On to story number 2, and the Australian Bureau of Statistics released its first ever monthly measure of inflation yesterday, and the number was high, but probably not as high as some economists expected.
Now, the new measure has been in testing for a while, and it shows that consumer prices rose by 6.8% in the year to August, down from 7% in the year to July. But that 7%, that number was only released yesterday, was the highest annual inflation reading in 30 years. The fall was mostly due to a drop in fuel prices, but where there is real inflation is in food and non-alcoholic beverages, particularly fruit and veggies. Just a quick one before I go to, do you know that the value of wealth in the June quarter, according to the Bureau of Statistics, fell by nearly $500 billion to $14.4 trillion. Just massive numbers. Now, it's all about property prices falling and share markets falling, therefore people's super funds falling. Still, $500 billion, massive number.
That is a big number, whichever way you look at it. Story number 3, Sean, probably a bit of good news here. The federal government has done a deal with East Coast LNG exporters, which will ensure that more gas is available here for local use.
This is in response to the near blackouts and stress on the national electricity grid a couple of months ago and an ACCC report that predicted a 10% shortfall in the East Coast gas market next year. Resources Minister Madeleine King said additional gas will be made available to the market by the 3 big producers, that's Santos, ConocoPhillips and Shell. In return, the Albanese government won't pull the trigger on the Australian domestic gas supply mechanism, which could prevent those producers from exporting LNG. The good news, if we believe her, is Ms. King said the gas supply deal should put downward pressure on prices.
Sean, story number 4. For quite a while, an Australian tech company called Nui was a bit of a share market darling, but now the corporate regulator is suing Nui, alleging that the board misled investors by pushing false growth targets when marketing its prospectus, and then for failing to inform investors when it knew targets would be missed.
Yes, Nui specialises in transforming huge amounts of data into usable information. Now, that's an in-demand service in 2022. But the company, which listed in late 2020 at around $8, is now trading at about 60 cents. The Australian Securities and Investments Commission alleges the board knowingly published misleading or deceptive statements when it said it would hit forecasts in its prospectus. Those comments were made in February and March 2021. They suggested the company would grow by 18.5%. In the end, it went backwards by about 4%. ASIC's also alleging that the Nui board should have announced a downgrade to forecasts sooner than it did.
Sean, final story, number 5. How about this? One of the world's longest direct flights, Auckland to New York, has had to recalibrate because of unseasonably strong winds. Probably not what you want to hear just before you get on a flight.
No, and I'm on that flight, in fact, in about 4 weeks. Look, after 2 years of planning, the Auckland-New York route commenced operations just a fortnight ago. The return leg at 17 hours and 35 minutes is the world's 4th longest, but Air New Zealand, which is 51% owned by the New Zealand government, said unusually strong headwinds in North America is playing havoc with calculations. In fact, the airlines at times has been forced to offload passengers and luggage so it can make the distance. On the flight to New York, the carrier can take a maximum of 260 passengers. On the flight back, it's just 180. passengers. The government hopes the route will revitalise tourism to the Shaky Isles, only if it gets there though.
All right, there we go. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 30th of September 2022. Remember to hit follow on the podcast, and if 5 minutes isn't enough for you, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.